Good afternoon. My name is Yoo-Jin, and I'm a research fellow at KICJ, and I'll be moderating the opening and special sessions. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to the 2022 International Forum of the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice. The topic of today's forum is Emerging Technologies and Human Rights, Ethical Considerations in Regulating Artificial Intelligence. So this forum this year consists of 3 sessions, a special session and 2 thematic sessions. And we are going to have the special session and the first thematic session today, and we will hold the second thematic session tomorrow morning, which is on automated decision-making and human rights. So the presentations and discussions are in English and Korean, and we provide simultaneous interpretation. So if you wish to change the language, please select one of the language options on your screen. And this forum is also live streamed on YouTube in English and Korean. So now we are going to begin with the opening remarks by Professor Ha Tae-hoon, President of Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice. Please welcome President Ha Tae-hoon.
Good afternoon. I am Ha Tae-hoon, President of the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice. I'm very to hold the 9th Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice International Forum on the theme of Emerging Technologies and Human Rights, Legal and Ethical Considerations in Regulating AI. We are having the 9th meeting this year, and it explores the human rights-based approaches to AI following the UN resolution on new and emerging digital technologies and human rights adopted by the Human Rights Council in 2019 and 2021. The international community is currently witnessing dramatic changes in multiple aspects of our lives, induced by the rapid advancement of digital and AI technology. Artificial intelligence enables fast, efficient computation and streamlines decision-making in the face of the constant influx of information in modern society. Further expanding from its economic, medical, and educational uses in the private sector, AI technology is now employed by government administrations from around the world. However, there have been rising concerns over the risks of privacy violation and discrimination that stem from AI technology. We find ourselves faced with the challenge of establishing safeguards and regulatory measures within and across borders in the design and application of AI for human rights protection. In particular, with AI algorithms replacing human judgment with automated decision-making systems, it is imperative that we ensure transparency, accountability, and human oversight in its decision-making. In light of these circumstances, today's international forum aims to bring together experts from around the world to share trends in global regulatory frameworks to mitigate the risk of human rights violation by AI and provide a platform for exchanging knowledge and experience on legal and policy issues surrounding rights-based ethical regulation of emerging technologies. I would like to thank Mr. Song Do-hwan, the Commissioner of Human Rights Commission, for delivering the congratulatory remark in a few minutes. And also, I'd like to thank Professor Sang-Wook Lee from Hanyang University, Ms. Maya Brem, Legal Advisor at the ICRC, Dr. Baroness Boutin, Senior Researcher at Aster Institute, Professor Jungu Yu from the Center for International Law of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, Professor Woo-min Shim from Kyungin National University of Education, Dr. Ji-sun Choi, Research Fellow at the KICJ, Dr. Yuri Song, Research Fellow at the KICJ, for your presentations to be made. And I am also grateful for our panelists, Ms. Mitzi Ostero, Program Manager at Nonviolence International Southeast Asia, Dr. Kyungkyu Park, Research Fellow at the KICJ, Ms. Yeogyung Chang, Executive Director at the Institute of Digital Rights, Dr. Tae-kyung Kang, Research Fellow at the KICJ, and moderators, Professor Shi Jin-oh from Kangwon National University Law School and Professor Chun Soo-yang from Yeongnam University Law School. I hope that today's forum will serve as an opportunity to share valuable knowledge and insight on ethical and legal issues in enhancing rights-based approaches to AI technology. I now announce the opening of the 9th Korean Institute in Criminology and Justice International Forum.
Thank you very much. Next on the program is congratulatory remarks by Mr. Song Do-hwan, chairperson of the National Human Rights Council of Korea. But unfortunately, Mr. Song was unable to attend, so he has sent us his pre-recorded message. Please play the message.
안녕하십니까. 국가인권위원회 위원장 송두환입니다. 제9회 한국
Good
형사
afternoon. I am Do-hwan Song, chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission of Korea. I would like to extend my congratulations on the opening of the 9th International Forum of KICJ. I express my heartfelt gratitude to President Tae-hoon Ha and staff of the Institute for hosting this forum. And I'd also like to thank speakers and panelists for their contribution to each session. At this year's forum, we will focus on emerging technologies and human rights, going beyond the often discussed topic of criminal policy. The choice of this year's topic seems to reflect the forward-looking approach taken by the KICJ since it relaunched itself as the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice and broadened the scope of work to criminal justice and legal policy in May 2021. Therefore, I think this year's theme is all the more meaningful. Artificial intelligence technologies, which replace human judgment with algorithms, are at the core of this forum, held under the theme of emerging technologies and human rights. AI is expected to make decisions that will manage and control various aspects of our lives in the near future. We are already witnessing numerous examples where AI is having a direct impact on human lives and human rights in Korea and other parts of the world, including corporate recruitment system, police crime risk assessment tools, and AI chatbots. To keep up with the trend, the international community is actively developing systems and guidelines to address potential adverse effects of artificial intelligence. The National Human Rights Commission of Korea, for its part, released human rights guidelines on the development and deployment of AI, which primarily focus on human dignity, autonomy, and diversity of individuals and non-discrimination measures. The Commission will keep monitoring the situation to prevent human rights violations caused by new and emerging technologies like AI. Wider AI deployment is a road not taken, but by humanity. Thus, experts and stakeholders need to gather their wisdom to address potential risks of these new emerging technologies. In this regard, the International Forum of the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice is very timely and meaningful. KICJ is the first national policy research institute that the National Human Rights Commission of Korea signed an MOU with this year, with the aim of working together for the promotion of human rights. As you will see at today's forum, there will be multiple human rights challenges that demand our joint effort. I look forward to continuing our cooperation with the KICJ for the protection and promotion of human rights. Once again, I would like to congratulate you for hosting the 9th International Forum of KICJ, and I would like to wish all participants health and success. Thank you.
And now we are going to move on to the next program, the special session. We are pleased to have a distinguished speaker, Professor Lee Sang-wook from Hanyang University. His research interests cover a wide range of topics in the philosophy of science and technology, and he's been working on various ethical issues relating to science and technology, including AI ethics, biobanks, and pharmacological enhancement. And Professor Lee has been chairing several technology assessment committees of the Korean government, and also he's been a member of UNESCO World Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology since 2018 and a vice chair since 2021. And he was the rapporteur of the ad hoc experts group for drafting the UNESCO recommendation of AI ethics in 2020. So I would like to invite Professor Lee to speak. Please welcome Professor Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for really nice introduction. And I truly honored, and it's my great pleasure to give this talk. And especially this is about the relationship between the frontier technologies and the legal justice in terms of this human rights consideration. And this is a really important topic for the general development of AI, as well as the ethical aspects of AI technology. I will share my PowerPoints. Okay. I'm going to talk about the frontier technology and human rights, especially in the context of AI and post-human attitude. Before I actually talk about what I'm going to argue for, I want to make sure that when I talk about AI technology, I'm going to talk about AI technology in the present and the near future. I'm not going to talk about the AI technology in a very futuristic films like this Her, the movie, where you find really humanly undistinguishable AI, which is not actually in the range of AI technology for the near future. Okay, before I am going to cover the general topics of AI ethics issues, I would like to focus on the general attitude adopted by various international recommendation and the declaration on the AI ethics, like OECD, EU, and IEEE, and the UNESCO. They all recognize that frontier technologies such as AI could promote or enhance the human welfare in the global area. But they also recognize that it can actually threaten core values of our society, especially basic human rights. So they try to have a balance between the protection of core values and promotion of innovation. I think this has a widespread agreement in the AI community, AI ethics governance community in the world. But the problem is, with this balance of consideration, it's not very clear how to actually realize this balance in each very difficult cases. These difficulties comes from the two uncertainties, I think. First type of uncertainties, epistemic uncertainties, which means that because AI technology is not a mature technology, it's not complete technology, it's actually in the process of development. So we cannot be sure what exact nature of AI technology in the future, which may affect human rights and society. So we cannot really have a complete way of, let's say, the justified way of dealing with AI technology at the moment, because we just don't know what kind of AI technology we are going to have in the future. But I do believe the more difficult uncertainties to deal with is not epistemic uncertainties, but it's more institutional uncertainties, meaning that because this technology development and response from the individuals and societies are interactional, meaning that they are influenced by the other response and then reflected into the next level of development. The institutional response of our society and the individual adoption of AI technology actually will influence greatly how AI technology will develop in the future. And because this is interactional, it's actually doubly difficult to have quite clear view about what kind of interactions we have to pay attention to and what would be the most challenging aspect of this interaction. So we do have these two uncertainties, and the Stuart Russell, one of these frontier AI engineers, emphasized that in this case of uncertainties, we have to put human values, especially human rights and what he calls the egalitarian attitude of utilitarianism should be promoted and built in the AI design by making AI is learning how these human values are realized in various cases, but it's not in the direct coding way. I mean, we cannot really code the ethical principles in the AI, but rather AI has to learn various ways from the human behavior and social interactions among individuals. I mean, this is one proposal. I'm not particularly advocating this because there are lots of difficulties in this approach. But what I'm going to say is because of these two uncertainties, even AI engineers are in various approaches to try to realize this kind of balances in different design mode and different technological projects. Okay, I'm going to talk about the three different ways of utilizing AI in society, and I try to raise some of the issues relating to these three different usage. First one is the most familiar one, AI as a prediction machine. I mean, it's just well known that the AI is really remarkable in its performance of learning past data, past experience of human civilization, and come up with a certain patterning, and using that patterning to predict what is going to happen in a given domain. So AI can create art, which is strikingly resemble the Rembrandt genuine art, and various other musical performance. AI is really outstanding in mimicking various styles of musical composers like Mozart. Right, but it's also well known that the problem of AI as a prediction machine, which is actually the core of this high performance of a prediction machine, because it heavily relies on the past data, it also has to inherit all the problems and prejudices and biases, and our past histories are not really perfect in any ethical sense. We have to overcome various disadvantages and problems of past society to promote a better society. And because AI as a prediction machine has to rely on this problematic data set of past, it actually reproduce kind of patterns we wouldn't take it as ethically valid. So that's a kind of challenge which I think many of the authors and programmers and the policymakers are trying to serve at the moment. Now, AI as a judgment machine. This is actually kind of explorative stage. I mean, some of the engineers strongly believe that the AI can be a very good judgment machine, and some of them are very hesitant about the usefulness of AI as a judgment machine. Promise of AI to help judgment is well recognized, and it's actually quite effective only in the context of like the Go play, meaning that if you can define the purpose function in a mathematically very clean way, in that kind of restricted situation, AI can be a very good, very effective judgment machine to come up with best possible choices given the computational time limit. But the real problem is, of course, the really difficult problems we want to serve in the society usually doesn't have a very cleaned up purpose function, not in a mathematically cleaned up at least. We have various values and considerations, but it's very difficult to come up with a mathematically well-defined function, which actually come up with the right balance of all these functions. So unless AI engineers come up with a completely different algorithm, if AI as a judgment machine has to rely on this kind of final purpose function maximization, optimization, then the coverage of AI as a judgment machine has to be limited to a small range of well-defined problems. I'm not denying the usefulness of that function. For instance, AI as a judgment machine can be really powerful in energy optimization in the smart city energy grid. But that case is also the one example of mathematically well-defined the proposed function to be obtained. So that, I think, is the kind of challenge for the future of AI. How to come up with AI implementing the various considerations, not in terms of this prototypical optimization procedure. Okay. Now, this is a really difficult topic. I mean, some of the engineers and the policymakers are exploring the possibility of AI as a decision machine. For instance, I have participated in the AIEA, the consultation on AI ethics, and they are trying to explore the possibility of using AI in the decision-making with respect to the nuclear power plant, not just in terms of maintenance, the day-by-day maintenance job, but also in the case of a really big or small-scale risk management. And if, God forbid, but if a disaster really happens, then how to deal with these disasters in a most effective way. Now, again, I'm not denying the intrinsic possibility of AI as a decision machine, but here the problem is really difficult to serve using only AI standard algorithm because decision to act something like when some defect has been found on the concrete wall of a nuclear power plant, what would you do? I mean, that's a kind of decision you have to make. It's not just a decision in your head, but you have to actually act according to the decision. And this decision has many social consequences and responsibility issues and liability issues, which has to be served in a more institutional way, not just the engineering way, entire society. So I think we have a lot to do to have really plausible notion of AI as a decision machine. Okay, and there are several reasons to support the difficulties of AI as a decision machine, or even AI as a judgment machine. First one is a well-known fact that current AI technology is not genuinely a semantic machine. I mean, there are technology which says it's a semantic machine, but what I'm saying semantic machine is semantic in the sense of human understanding of meanings of words and phrases. So AI which recognize this picture as a school bus quite correctly, if we add this adversarial meaningless to us, a noise, it actually changes its mind to say that it's a ostrich. And we humans, because we tend to recognize some semantically important aspect of this school bus, unless this macroscopic feature doesn't change, then we will recognize this also as a school bus, not ostrich. But because AI does not see pictures as a human does, it has a convolution calculation optimization algorithm. So it has this mysterious failure. And if you look at this, it's quite difficult to justify that when we make a very important social decision, really we can trust AI to make this kind of decision. I mean, it doesn't actually recognize semantically significant factors. Then how we anticipate their ability to understand the complication of human affairs and social justice problem. So that's a one problem we have to deal with. So AI has big problems in understanding and analogical inference. Not because AI technology is outdated or I mean, not under development, but the conventional AI technology doesn't actually pay much attention to the semantic aspect or social aspect of decision making. And I think that is a great challenge for the AI engineering as well as AI ethics in the future. And second challenge is the danger of explainability. This is really danger. I mean, many people believe that explainability is the solution, not danger. Yes, a certain sense, explainability can be a solution. But because AI doesn't operate at the level of semantically understandable level, the kind of explainability AI produce may be kind of pseudo explanation, meaning that actually AI doesn't recognize the major concepts appearing in the explanation, but it calculates its final result in a very optimization way. Then it just tried out various approximation of this abstract concept and try to come up with some make sense, sensible pseudo explanation. And unless we have a very clear way of recognizing the difference between the true semantic explanation and this pseudo explanation, actually too much belief in explainability can be a danger. That's what I'm going to say. And I'm going to skip, because I have just 2 minutes left, I'm going to skip this accountability. This is partially explained because given the possibility of potential disasters, I mean, it is very difficult to use AI as a decision machine in the critical context such as nuclear power plants. Okay, for last 2 minutes, I want to say a few words about the post-humanism. As I said before, I'm not going to say that, the AI is the equal with the humans and we have to give the whole rights to the AI as well. That's the post-human. I mean, that could happen maybe 100 years later. What I want to emphasize is the humanism has many meanings. This is just the dictionary meaning of various humanism. And this humanism has a history of changing its core values and core claims. For instance, basic human rights was not a core concept before 17th centuries. If you look at the humanism in Renaissance period or even the 16th century humanism, you cannot find the human rights concept. So I'm not denying the importance of human rights concept. Well, I'm just saying that humanism has been evolved into various forms. That means we can have post-humanism, which can have a much flexible attitude toward non-humans, such as AI and as we did with animals. And we have a precedence of legal personhood, like the companies and various organizations. So I will suggest that the post-humanism not as a very strong view about the very futuristic attitude, but methodological attitude. So we shouldn't just think that the modernist view of human rights is a kind of fixed one, and it's not be violated by any means. But we try to come up with a more plausible explanation of this human rights and human justice in the context of frontier technologies such as AI. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Professor Lee Sang-wook, and thank you for keeping time. Now, I would like to inform you that we are going to have a break for 10 minutes or 9 minutes, and then begin the first session at 4:50. So please stay online. Thank you. Okay, we are going to proceed with the forum and start the first session. So I would like to introduce the moderator of the presentation and discussion session 1. So Professor Oh Si-jin 교수님 from Gangwon National University Law School. Please go on.
All right, thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Si-jin, and I will be your moderator for this session. Maya Braham is a legal advisor in the Arms and Conduct of Hostility Unit of Legal Division of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Her present work focuses on questions of international humanitarian law raised by new technologies of warfare, including autonomous weapon systems and the promotion of responsible arms transfers. She will be presenting, this is a very interesting topic, she will be presenting artificial intelligence in armed conflict toward a human-centered approach. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Oh. And thank you also to the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice for the kind invitation to participate in this important conference. I am honored to contribute to this discussion on behalf of the International Committee of the Red Cross, in short, the ICRC. Now, for those of you in the audience who are not familiar with this organization, this humanitarian organization, the ICRC aims to protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence, and to prevent suffering by promoting and strengthening universal humanitarian principles and international humanitarian law, in short, IHL, the body of law applicable in armed conflicts. The simple expression military AI, military artificial intelligence, stands for a complex reality. AI can be put to a vast array of military tasks with potentially far-reaching implications for warfare. Now, to be clear, the ICRC is not opposed to AI nor to its application in the military domain. In line with our mandate, the ICRC advocates for a human and humanity-centered approach to the development and use of AI. We seek to deepen understanding of the humanitarian ramifications of military applications of AI, notably in terms of risks and harm to persons affected by war, such as civilians. We seek to support efforts to minimize uncertainty about these ramifications and we seek to reduce and prevent adverse humanitarian consequences. Recent advances in AI, including machine learning techniques and related technologies, enable ever more complex and wider applications in the military domain, and this raises some pressing questions and also gives rise to some concerns. Now, the ICRC has flagged previously 3 broad and overlapping areas of military AI application for particular consideration. First, AI enables developments in cyber and information warfare. Now, I will not address this topic here today. Second, increasing autonomy in robotic systems, including weapon systems. AI can be used to control functions in physical military hardware, including increasingly uncrewed robotic systems. And this enables increasing autonomy in the functions of such systems. That can be navigation, but it can also be targeting functions. And a particular concern in this area are so-called autonomous weapon systems, which select and engage targets without human intervention. And the third broad area for consideration from our perspective is AI and machine learning techniques in military decision-making. AI plays a growing role in computerized tools that can, for example, display or synthesize or even analyze relevant information for a military commander or propose options for how to achieve a military goal. And such decision support systems can be used for various military tasks at different levels of command, including in relation to decisions on the use of force. Now, international humanitarian law applies to the use of AI applications during armed conflict. But existing rules of international humanitarian law do not explicitly prohibit military AI nor particular applications thereof. However, AI applications used as weapons, means, or methods of warfare must comply with the rules of international humanitarian law governing the conduct of hostilities. Now, increasing reliance on AI in the military domain poses a number of challenges to the respect for international humanitarian law. The application of humanitarian law rules in practice calls for context-dependent legal determinations and value judgments and presupposes the exercise of human agency and moral deliberation. Yet, AI technologies typically operate differently from the way human beings make sense and learn and reason and take action. Current algorithms are not built with causal reasoning in mind, and it is typically difficult for human beings to make sense of how input variables relate to outputs of AI systems. For this reason, it can be hard for human users to predict how a decision support system or an autonomous weapon system based on AI will perform in a given situation. It may be unclear and difficult to explain why a decision support system recommended a certain course of action above others, or why an autonomous weapon system launched a missile at a particular moment. These challenges are especially acute with contemporary machine learning techniques, and they can have grave consequences for persons affected by war. For example, in the area of AI-enabled military decision support systems, even in war, for example, a decision to intern a person for security reasons must conform with the principle of legality, It must only be ordered for reasons and in accordance with procedures provided for in law. And this entails, among other safeguards, a right to be informed of the reasons for internment. Now, reliance on an AI-based decision system may expose persons to the risk of internment because they share certain characteristics with persons associated with past security incidents or that have been interned in the past. Such internment decisions may not satisfy the legal requirements under international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Another concern in this domain relates to the well-documented biases inherent in AI systems. These pose a risk of decisions resulting in adverse distinctions among persons protected under international humanitarian law in violation of the Geneva Conventions. And finally, in respect of decisions relating to the use of force, certain civilians, for instance, men of a certain age range, may be exposed to an elevated risk of attack in violation of IHL, or attackers using such systems may fail to account for the presence of civilians or certain groups of civilians in the vicinity of a military objective, exposing these civilians to a heightened risk of incidental harm. Such challenges and risks, in our perspective, stem from significant obstacles faced by the users of these systems to fully grasp the uncertainties and assumptions and biases embedded in the systems and that can arise in human interaction with them. Users may not be afforded the information nor the opportunity to account for such limitations. They may not have the time, because a key driver for the adoption of AI-enabled decision support systems is to drastically speed up the process from data collection to acting on that information. So in sum, increasing reliance on AI and especially machine learning brings greater complexity, and the decision support systems increases the challenge of ensuring that human beings make appropriate, contextually informed, and justifiable decisions on the basis of the outputs of such systems. In autonomous weapon systems, they raise acute concerns about unpredictability by design and the risk of unlawful attacks. The ICRC is of the view that legal obligations and ethical responsibilities bear on moral agents, human beings. They cannot and they must not be outsourced to software. Military applications of AI must be lawful and acceptable in light of the principles of humanity. They should aim to support and facilitate human decision-making, not supplant it. In light of the challenges, risks, and uncertainties posed by military applications of AI, the ICRC urges states and other stakeholders to approach the development and use of such military applications with the utmost caution. And in relation to autonomous weapon systems specifically, the ICRC recommends that states explicitly prohibit autonomous weapon systems that are designed or used in a manner such that their effects cannot sufficiently be understood, predicted, and explained. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, stressing on the mandate and the idea of ICRC, I think. The second speakers will be Berenice Boutin. She's a senior researcher in international law at the Asser Institute, University of Amsterdam. Dr. Boutin leads the Dilemma project on designing international law ethics into military artificial intelligence, and is a research coordinator on disruptive technologies in peace and security. And also, Sajad Sultanza is a postdoctoral researcher in ethics and philosophy of technology with the Dilemma project at the Astor Institute, University of Amsterdam. Dr. Sultanza has recently published a monograph entitled Problem-Solving Technologies, which he develops a practice-oriented philosophy of technology. Their presentation will be on legal and ethical perspectives on the impact of military applications of AI on human judgment and agency. The floor is yours, Baroness Boutin.
Thank you very much. Can you just confirm that, yeah, I can see the slides are showing well. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and also thanks, our thanks to the organizers for inviting us to this event. So first of all, I would like to make a few remarks that will indeed also align with what Maya said. What are we talking about when we talk about military applications of AI? Since 5-10 years, majority of the debates are focused on autonomous weapon systems, sometimes colloquially referred to as killer robots. These are applications of AI in which a weapon system would be able to select and engage targets with limited or no human involvement. And this raises, of course, major ethical and legal issues that are the subject of ongoing multilateral debates in Geneva. But as Maya also indicated, the use of AI in warfare, we realize more and more is not just a matter of autonomous weapons. At the moment, there is more and more attention being paid to other potentially challenging uses of AI in warfare, such as facial recognition, intelligence and surveillance at mass scale, the detection of threats, the evaluation of risks. Potentially, AI could make prediction in terms of strategic modes of action, and could be integrated in almost all types of military function. And these applications of AI indeed are used in support of human decision making. But the risk, as highlighted by the previous speaker, is that AI used in support of decision making indirectly leads to replacing some very important aspects of human decision making. I would like to provide you just with some illustrative examples of ongoing practice of states that are very busy in investing, in developing and in deploying AI in the battlefield. For instance, AI has been used now for target recognition. AI increasingly is used as a partner for human soldiers. So, for instance, to assist in analyzing a situation and a context. And these types of uses of AI in the military context raised difficult questions that touch upon law, but also ethics. And this is why here in The Hague, we are conducting a project entitled the Dilemma Project, and that focuses on international law and ethics of military artificial intelligence. We are seeking to bridge gaps and make connections between different disciplines, because we truly believe that an interdisciplinary perspective is absolutely necessary to address the difficult questions raised by AI in armed conflict. I will now hand over the floor to my colleague Sajjad, who will provide you with some background on the ethical and philosophical dimension of the problem before I will take over to discuss legal implications.
Thank you, Bernice. So as a result of the introduction of military AI systems, one of the common themes which has been argued is the governance of military AI system. And this has become an important topic of debate for many academics, but also policymakers and civil society. And one of the recurring arguments is that that there must be a human which needs to be present and involved in the context of use and in the context which technical systems are operated. So some of the common themes that I should mention in relation to the status quo of some of the discussions is that there is indeed still some focus which is more on the killer robots, which as defined earlier by Maya and Bernice are autonomous weapon systems. But we also want to echo the voice that there is other technologies such as decision support systems, which can also create moral and legal challenges. Now, many of the governance ideas on the military applications of AI systems also put humans against machines. Humans are considered to be on one side of the table and machines on the other side. This is also why one of the common themes is direct human control. And many governance ideas recommend the presence and supervision of humans at different stages of the life cycle of weapon systems. And the requirement of human oversight has led to idea of one of the notions which has been discussed for many years is meaningful human control. The notion of meaningful human control is proposed in support of the idea that human agents must retain a certain degree of control or influence over autonomous systems. Now, to move the discussion forward from the current status quo, we also need to look at some of the philosophical assumptions that underpin current ideas. There is an underlying assumption about agency and about human agency in these debates and these governance ideas. Agents are defined as entities who possess certain capacities. Capacity to meaningfully interact with machines, supervise system functions, understand the decisions or recommendations of machines, and where necessary, interfere and override the system. It is considered that the presence and involvement of humans with these capacities would contribute to legally compliant and morally desirable operation of socio-technical systems in the context of military AI. This is a slightly narrow conception of agency and human agency because it also ignores some other capacities and tendencies that humans which may have. The previous speaker, Maya, referred to some of the issues of bias which can be present in some machines and algorithms. Another issue that we should highlight is also the tendencies of humans to also follow those machines. And this is called automation bias. And this can, of course, exaggerate the problems that the moral and legal problems that can arise from the use of some military support, decision support systems. This is also a binary notion of agency. It assumes that entities are either agent or not agent. This is a bit black and white, and it doesn't allow understanding agency as a spectrum, which can be exercised to different degrees. Some of the governance ideas also make an instrumentalist assumption about technologies. Instrumentalism in philosophy of technology is the idea that technologies are neutral tools and humans can have full control over technologies. Although we do wish to have control over technologies, it is also very important to understand the impact that technologies can have on human and human decision-making. Now I would like to hand over the floor back to Bernice to discuss some of the impacts of military AI on human judgment and human agency.
Thank you. Indeed, AI, and in particular machine learning-based system, how do they work? They collect and analyze very large amounts of data. There are complex systems of algorithms that will process the data, identify some patterns and some connections. And what it makes is that what it does is that it makes predictive recommendation. AI is not intelligent the way humans are. So for instance, in the military context, we can imagine combining millions of drone footage with satellite images, telecommunication data, terrain analysis, and other factors. All of this data fed into one algorithm that then can make recommendations to a human soldier on a potential course of action. For instance, whether a threat is incoming and how to respond to it. The problem in that situation is that the direct operator of the AI system really has very, very limited ability to effectively exercise decision-making. And this is due to what my colleague Sajjad was just explaining. Issues of automation bias, as well as cognitive overload, make it really difficult for the operator to actually exercise judgment and to actually assess the value of recommendations. There's also the problem of the black box with machine learning AI. We cannot precisely trace the factors of why a certain location ends up ranked higher on the target list. So how can an operator exercise any meaningful control at this stage? This just does not really work. So what AI does is that it really reconfigures the role and extent of human control over decision-making in the battlefield. And this, of course, has major implications, and I would like to highlight for you a number of the legal implications. In order to apply the core principles of IHL, such as distinction, proportionality, or precaution, a certain degree of human agency or human judgment is necessary. The soldier requires some cognitive awareness in order to make these decisions. However, as we explained, the AI will make it very difficult for human operators to exercise this human judgment. And in turn, this results in a difficulty for soldiers to apply and comply with core principles of IHL. And in turn, this has large consequences for allocation of, for questions of responsibility, right? If we have breach of IHL in the battlefield, how can we then allocate responsibility when AI is involved? Not only will soldiers have difficulty complying with core principles of IHL, if a breach occurs, we will also have difficulties in assigning responsibility. Of course, we should not assign responsibilities to machine, but we should not either assign responsibilities to humans who did not have sufficient control or intent over the outcome. Therefore, this can lead to responsibility gaps, which of course would be very problematic if there is harmful conduct in violation of international law happening, and then no one can be held responsible. If we would allocate responsibility to people with no control or intent over the outcome, this leads to a risk of scapegoating. This does not fulfill the purpose of responsibility, which also seek to allocate responsibility in a meaningful way and to provide reparation. And I would like to add that the issue of responsibility is not just a matter of compensation. It is also a matter of redress, a matter of transparency, and a matter of explainability of the conduct. Therefore, we should really be careful with those issues in order to provide proper redress and accountability for violations. However, an important aspect here is the earlier stages where decisions are made. We've made quite clear now that decisions by operators on the battlefield are not always very meaningful when AI is involved due to the limits of human cognitive skills versus how AI functions. However, decisions made at an earlier stage of the design and development of AI are becoming extremely important in this context. They play a direct role in how AI would behave once deployed. And this links to international law, because international law existing international comports a number of obligations that apply specifically prior to the deployment of artificial intelligence. Common Article 1 of the Geneva Convention prescribes a duty to respect, but also to ensure respect for IHL. And this includes positive obligations that any military tools or military personnel is deployed in compliance with IHL, but also designed with IHL in mind. So broadly, the duty to ensure respect for IHL under Common Article 1 can be interpreted as requiring to take active steps prior to deploying any AI on the battlefield to ensure that technologies are developed in a way that can comply with IHL. And this, linking back to our discussions on human agency, includes ensuring that systems operator can actually exercise meaningful human control and that accountability frameworks are provided. In other words, a system that would be deployed but that would not allow sufficient situational awareness of soldiers would possibly be considered in violation of these obligations to ensure respect, also in the sense of the technologies that are deployed. A more specific rule that I can briefly mention that you are probably all familiar with is Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions, which specifically provides that in the study, development, acquisition, or adoption of a new weapon, means, or methods of warfare, states are under an obligation to determine whether its employment would, in some or all circumstances, be prohibited by IHL. So these various obligations that apply at the stage of development of technology lead to a compliance by design approach. When states are considering AI in the battlefield, as there is a lot of investment in that field, it's not once killer robots are on the battlefield that we should ask questions. It is now, before those systems are deployed, that we should ensure that they are developed and deployed in full compliance, fully taking into account all the obligations, and they are designed in a way that they will make it possible for human operators to comply with their IHL obligations. In conclusion, I will hand over to my colleague Sajjad for that slide.
Thank you, Bernice. So to conclude, one thing that we should do, and I speak also as a philosopher, is we should also move away from the instrumentalist conception of technology, in which technologies are seen as neutral tools. And we should look at all the impacts and interactions that humans and technologies have with each other and how impact each other's agency. We need to also understand that agency and, of course, human agency can be exercised through different channels and at different contexts, and, of course, to different degrees. The context of use, the context of operation is normally the focus, but as Bernice also mentioned, other contexts, such as the context of regulation and the context of engineering in which the systems are produced, those are also very important phases at which agency and human agency can be exercised. And to ensure and foster compliance with international law and with IHL, it is also very important to focus on pre-deployment stages and make sure that AI systems are designed in ways that doesn't erode human agency and our humanitarian principles.
Moving forward, our last remarks for this presentation, we would like to make the recommendation that states and parties considering military AI should implement the existing legal framework in the context of new technologies. We have a lot of established laws, and although they do not explicitly deal with AI, they are applicable and they restrict the use and development of AI. We should ensure compliance throughout the stages of development, production, procurement, and use, and I should add here regulation also. We may need to develop interpretative guidance on responsibilities and obligations in relation to technologies. In other words, explain more specifically how the core principles of IHL can be applied in the context of AI, and works are being done in various international fora on this topic. Furthermore, we can seek to operationalize the legal and ethical framework with technical tools that will allow us to verify and certify that certain AI systems are able to comply with our legal and ethical obligations. And finally, we should reflect on core fundamental values underlying international norms and seek how to safeguard these values in the face of rapid technological change. Here are our contact details, email address and website of the project. Thanks again so much for the invitation, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and it was a presentation concerned on human agency and raised many questions that we might be able to discuss later. The third presenter is Professor Yu Jung-gu. He's a research professor of the Center for International Law at Korea National Diploma Academy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And concurrently, he serves as the visiting professor of the GSIS of Yonsei University. He has been a member of Advisory Committee of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Industry and Energy, and Ministry of Defense. He currently specializes in emerging technologies, security governance, and laws focusing on cyberspace and outer space. The floor is yours, Professor Jung-gu.
Thank you for the chair for kind introduction, and then let me begin by thanking the inviting me in this meaningful event to the KICJ. I think I was requested to present the military use of AI. So, and then during my presentation, maybe previous speakers, they mentioned probably there are some overlapping some content and area. I'm gonna skip the overlapping content. We may have to answer for the basic question for military use of AI. Firstly, how to manage interplay politics, economy, and science technology, because it's the rapid development of emerging technology. There are very much convergent aspects of particularly regulating the AI system. Secondly, can we predict scope and intensity of AI technology? Thirdly, are there any universal international laws and norms applied in any meaningful way? If not, maybe there can be two options: one for the draft new rules and regulation, or we have to maybe apply existing international laws and norms. Lastly, what are the law and policy options to set up the governance of AI systems? I think as we can understand, currently AI can be applied in the public and military sector, and then also the current some body of international law for regulating AI system. There is clear distinction between the commercial use and the military use of AI, but as time goes on, I think in case of much of a hybrid warfare and then some not exceeding to the armed conflict, in that cases, even in the military use of AI, also we have to think about the the peacetime operational AI system before the armed conflict and armed attack cases. Many countries set up the AI strategy, but I think if you maybe distinguish the AI strategy, some country maybe set up the strategy for very much a comprehensive way, which means including the military security and economic perspective. Some of the country only focus on the development AI in economic perspective. And then the previous Professor Lee mentioned that the really current AI technology, it is some overcome the singularity, some threshold issue, or just apply some the linear algorithm system. So I think if you look at the experimental some game system, in my elementary school, I really enjoyed that the game. Maybe if you look into the AI application in the one Atari game, maybe after 20 or after 1 hour later, almost the AI will be the second to none. And then maybe moving into another game, applying for AI technology, still it is not hard to overcome the level of the game level. That means also, if you look at the deep learning, the singularity issue, still there can be possibility to maybe misjudgment for some whole picture and for scenario. So look at the one picture, a man wearing the some hat, I think actually playing the violin. So I think even in the possibility 1 or 2% and the 5%, it's gonna be maybe a big disaster to the human being. Also, maybe AI judgment is even if AI judgment better than the human being, but I think in case of a human being, we can maybe the human being should be responsible for their misjudgment. But what if the AI cases? Who's going to be responsible for their misjudgment? That's going to be a legal issue or a policy issue for the AI regulation. So some scientists, maybe there are maybe different opinion. What later when the AI overcome the singularity issue, some commentators in 10 years and then some in 100 years, some commentators think about never. So I think that's the very some difficulty issue to regulate the AI system. So the body of international law governing AI, as I mentioned before, clear distinction between commercial and military use of AI. So I think the previous Professor Lee mentioned that the guideline and ethical use in some OECD and UNESCO and UN level. And then the other than the AI technology and then ICT, IoT, and emerging technology, the first committee of the UN and particularly the ICT UN OEWG and then GG meeting. So and then thirdly, we can see that the autonomous weapon system clearly discussed and then regulated in the law GGE. So what is the hybrid aspects of the use of AI? So personally, I'm in the legal advisor to the first committee CCW and the laws GGE. The law GGE maybe some state expand their scope into more including the peacetime regulation also, which means the human rights issue also, state responsibility issue. But the some technology leading country in case of armed conflict and armed attack, IHL is enough to regulate the AI cases. So it is very nuanced and tough question to answer. So another issue for regulating AI, so-called technology neutrality issue. So the maybe we can divide the two bipolar opinion. One for the clearly technology neutrality, which means the bad user, bad actor is important to regulate the bad actor and then misuse of AI application. And then the other opposite comment, maybe the AI have to be regulated for common goods of human kind. So the current the regulatory framework by the EU, adopted and then tried to the ratification by the member states, so-called the AI regulation. If you look into the AI regulation, probably some breaching the two opposite way of approach, the technology neutrality and some for common the good of mankind. And then also AI technology can be linked with other technology, human enhancement technology, military domain operation, and also new sources of kinetic weapon systems. So I think it is very convergent and then co-linked application of AI technology. So when it comes to the EU AI regulation, they divide into the 4 categories of AI technology: unacceptable, high risk, unlimited risk, and minimal risk. It means clearly EU AI regulation target for only focus on the commercial use, but as I mentioned before, in peacetime military operation, maybe EU AI regulation also is linked with the application. And also as for the data processing, if you look at the GDPR Article 35 in data processing, they maybe define the high risk and risk of data processing. So what if it is data processing by the AI technology? It is very also difficult to clear cut, and also the GDPR and then AI regulation probably in the future, which means the data adaptation of EU AI regulation. At that time, maybe there is a concurrent and then competing jurisdiction issue of AI regulation. So also the AI GDPR, the data processing article, they not defined what is the high risk and then or risk. There is another loophole to regulate the AI technology. And then this is also some difficulty issue, which means some AI military technology, military use of AI technology sometimes can be beneficial, which means to reduce the death of a human being, which means it's like some defensive technology. So we need to regulate the offensive technology. But in the position of a state, if one state developed the defensive technology, that means directly their offensive capacity will be decreases. It is very two faces of one coin. So as I mentioned before, currently there is no the autonomous weapons system in the low GGE, meaning then fully no autonomous weapons system. So as the previous speaker mentioned that we are not sure when we overcome the singularity issue, but I think if you maybe define only regulate fully autonomous weapons system, that means we are not sure when we maybe have a legal instrument to regulate autonomous weapons system. So lots of civil society, NGO, and then government level try to govern the AI system. And then in the laws EGE, there are 4 approaches to divide the risky AI technology, and then maybe can be possible AI technology. I'm going to skip over this some technical issue. So the military application, particularly in the armed attack, there are 2 groups with 3 different positions, which means the still AI technology is developing. So I think we are not sure how we're going to narrowly to regulate AI. So I think it needs to further discussion position. Secondly, even if it's not easy, but I think in this stage, some UN level try to maybe make a political declaration, and then maybe a third group for legally make a legally binding instrument. So and then as for the military application AI technology, 5 key issues related to the autonomous weapon system. That means AI can be predictable and then reliable, which means can we trust a killer robot? And then maybe it is another the race for the proliferation and armed race, which means particularly in the developing country, in the position of a developing country, the current maybe discussion for AI is going to be have and have not game. And then thirdly, even we have to think about the accountability issue of AI. But I think if the AI and then human being is the accountable for the military use of AI technology, but who is responsible for particularly has the legal responsibility for misuse of AI application? Then the substantial body of international regulating the AI, the IHL issue, and then state responsibility, and then the individual criminal responsibility, and then existing disarmament laws, and then link with the discussion for the body of international law. The Baron Asia's legal advisor will know better than me. The application of IHL to autonomous weapons system, we can simply divide into the 2 categories, one for the weapons law, the other for the method of a weapon, which means the targeting law system. So the first rule maybe must not be indiscriminate, and then the second rule for weapons law cannot cause unnecessary suffering or superfluous injury if that weapon system of AI is fall into the 2 categories. That means it should not maybe developed in the whole life cycle of weapon system. And then the targeting law application of IHL to autonomous weapon system, distinction, proportionality, and precaution issue. Let me just emphasize on the precaution issue of IHL, particularly current AI weapon system based on the sensing technology, which means closely linked with the cyber and IoT technology. In the cases and in practical manner, particularly in military operation, in precaution principle is very hard to apply in IHL other than the distinction proportionality issue. And then lastly, there is the legal review of Article 36, and then some military, some development of AI weapon system. There is the weapon review. Some country maybe have a weapon review laws in domestic law, but I think most of the states, other than very few states, don't have that kinds of mechanism to review the weapon system. And then skip over the what are the some policy and legal proposal for regulating autonomous weapon system. We can maybe simply think about the five policy option to ban the autonomous weapon system, and then maybe to set up the certain period of time of moratorium to examine the risk of the AI system. Maybe thirdly, in the science technology perspective, in curbing by programming, maybe to be an ethical governor. Fourthly, making existing regulation more specific to autonomous weapon system. And lastly, maybe we can say make a new rule and then set up the higher standard of protection for human being. That those five may be a policy and legal possibility and option. We may simply think about the whole architecture of AI system. But as I mentioned before, in current stage, probably the to make new rule or and then the apply existing international norms and regulation to the autonomous weapon system. So the as I previous discussed that the current the rules and regulation of AI, there are clear distinction between the commercial and military. Even in the military, we may maybe distinguish the peacetime military use of AI or some during the armed conflicts, and which means the use in battle time. So the current movement, I cautiously expect and the whole overall the comprehensive security perspective AI regulation maybe the in the CCW and GGE venue also set up the due some OW's meeting in the first committee in the UN system as a whole. Thank you for the listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Yejungu. It was a very interesting presentation in regard to artificial intelligence in application for military activities. And she also suggested some proposals that we might be able to discuss later. Now, we have two discussants. The first is Mitzi Ostero. She is the Secretary General of the Nonviolence International Southeast. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much to all the panelists earlier. Those are very well prepared presentations. And I do. There are I think I have a longer time since there's only two of us in the hour. But just on the points that was raised earlier already, I will no longer discuss some of those aspects. But just on the question, the theme of this conference is human rights-based approach. When we discuss human rights, especially in areas that have a higher risk, that are at a higher risk of being affected by armed conflict, we are talking about vulnerable communities. In terms of human control, human agencies, we did have a lot of discussions on those, what are the ethical dimensions of meaningful human control and human agency. Do notice that in these discussions, even at the multilateral discussions, even at the GGE laws, when we talk about human agency and meaningful human control, we're only referring to the actors who are holding the weapons. That is very clear. And we are also talking about states and their defense. But if we are to consider, a human rights-based approach and laws on establishing control or bans on AI and killer robots, we have to take into consideration not just the actors possibly holding these weapons, or in this case, there won't be any persons, right? There won't be any humans because they would be out of the loop. We have to we have to also discuss it from the perspective of how the communities, the humans in the communities that will be affected. So the agency, when we say human agency, in these discussions, which I was also present in the last GGO laws discussions in uh, August in Geneva, there was no mention actually of how how are the victims' perspectives being put in our Nonviolence International Southeast Asia did a regional stakeholder consultation. So we broke down the series. One day or one stakeholder meeting was focused on uh, technology and also those companies who are developing AI and also scientists. Another session was focused on people who are working with victims and survivors of conflict. And also, we had survivors attend as well. And then another part, of course, is civil society who are campaigning or advocating for a ban on killer robots. So there are very different stages. For example, in the question on is there a clear accountability, which this was discussed by I think Berenice and Sajad earlier on accountability of the AI. When it when a for example, if a bomb is dropped in a community, that community will will have to be at the forefront as well of addressing the direct impact of that weapon. When you are addressing the direct impact of the weapon, you're already addressing injuries, fatalities. You know. Redress comes in later. Justice is not immediate. It's not even at the concern yet of a affected, community when something like that happens. So if if there's already an issue with how to trace back accountability, how much more if it will be victims seeking accountability for their injuries or the fatalities in the community. So it's that kind of I think that's there were a lot of aspects that were already discussed on the ethical concerns, but that was one part that I had hoped to see if somebody would bring that up on the victim, the victimology, the victim centered approach as well, and the other one is there seems to be a dichotomy and the control as I said in the use of force it's either the hu- uh, the dichotomy of the use of weapons is only on the state and also only in either those who will be able to acquire those weapons. So the dichotomy of the discussions is always based on those. So we're only talking about who are using weapons. And if you look at it at that point, there's not even any dichotomy. It's just who are able to use the weapons. What about people who are not able to use the weapons? So their agency no longer counts in this discussion. So where is the ethical discussion surrounding that? And also, where is the legal discussions? Where are they in the legal framework? When it's too central, the discussions that are ongoing, not in this conference per se, but also in the UN meetings we have attended recently. The focus is too much on the control of the weapons, not on who it will be used for. These weapons are not being developed to be, put in a cabinet with lock and key. Why are these weapons being developed and who are they going to be used for? So those are just parts of, these are some, when you in our because we work as well in conflict affected communities, these are questions that of course when you're on the ground and you are seeing the impact of uh, existing weapons already in the community, there's already very difficult very difficult addressing, especially injustice, trying to attain justice. IHL, for example, in the Philippines, we do have an IHL Act. We do have a national IHL Act. But there has never been a single case filed using that act since 2010. It was actually, uh, the law became effective in 2010. We're now approaching 2023. So it's already very difficult to establish that uh, accountability using IHL with clear actors, with clear actors that you can already see and clear weapons that you can already hold. So this really will be posing a much larger problem. Now on the discussions at GGE laws, there has been some proposals from various states, and one of it is the one of the proposals is actually adding a protocol 6 to the discussion to the CCW. So the Philippines, together with 10 other countries, have already proposed. I'm not sure if maybe we could share it here in the chat. Share the link to the latest copy of the proposal for Protocol 6. Let me just share it for everyone. And maybe somebody can send it, the secretary can send it to the participants as well. So in the past, there have already been in my discussions with some of the proponents, Argentina and the Philippines, on this proposal for Protocol 6. They have informed me that, when they came up with this Protocol 6, there were already previous discussions on the agreed principles. And this is the bare minimum on the agreed principles. There are things that, of course, civil society, we do want to look at the other things present. So in the absence of an existing just an existing law or treaty that really bans killer robots. There, as this, I think this was mentioned by the presentation by Sajad and Berenice, that there are existing mechanisms, not just IHL. There are other conventions that can be used. There are synergies and interoperability of these laws. However, addressing this has to really look into all that can be implemented from the perspective of the states. It's always going back, of course, to the states because they are the ones negotiating and deciding on this future control or regulation. And when you go back at that level, I would just like to circle back on the issue of is it really the question, the laws being proposed, is it about regulation or is it really about banning? There are two for advocates who are, of course, against killer robots. There's also that of course when we talk to state actors, not everyone would be in the same page and trying to put in an ideal world, this should not even be a discussion. This shouldn't even exist. But there's already that kind of debate as whether what kind of laws are we putting? Are we putting laws that's regulating only that means these weapons, AI, in their will be developed and will be able to kill in the future. If we're talking about regulation, then we are talking about how to regulate the use. But if it's a complete ban, then of course we're saying this is completely banned, it won't be developed, and therefore it won't be used. So there's a, for legal institutions, it's important to consider that aspect. Are you just looking at the regulation, or does it really banned? And then also on in this process, I think in lawmaking process or international lawmaking process, there's also the question of who participates in the entire process. For example, in our region alone in Southeast Asia or even in East Asia as well, are other stakeholders other than security sector are able to participate. The discussions from an enforcement perspective, so we're talking about police, military, would be very different from the judiciary perspective. We're talking about lawyers, judges, prosecutors. They would have very different, I would assume in our in our consultations in the region, they would have very different perspectives. For example, in law enforcement, it's easy for them to link AI use in weapons because there is a connotation that with AI there is no bias. There are no human biases. That with AI the precision would be higher. There is that in our consultations with law enforcement. That's the dominant argument. But when we talk to scientists and also to robotics engineers from Japan and Indonesia and also in Singapore, from their perspective, especially from machine learning, they said we put too much credit to AI. For example, in machine learning by scientists in Indonesia, they had presented a self-learning machine. They have given it a dilemma. The dilemma is there's a train approaching. On one side of and it's a 4-track. On one track, there's 1 person. On the other track, there's 10 persons. So if we base it on sci-fi, Asimov's iRobot, it would make sense that it would choose to save the 10 people over 1. But when presented with the problem, the machine did 10 out of 10 did not do anything. It was unable to decide. So even at that level, so with the question of saving 1 over 10, it just rendered itself inactive. So even with the question of saving 9 more lives or not, it could not answer that. So how much more on these more complex questions where we put in legal, ethical, and moral dilemmas into AI. So those are just some additional points. I'm cognizant of the time. I've already taken up 13 minutes. But I am. I'll just be. If there are questions, we are. I'm just here. So please type up your questions. I would give it back to the chair, Mr. Season. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions and comments. And there are many questions that we could discuss. And human agency, accountability related to victim-centered approach, who are not able to use robots, ethical issues in the not so developed worlds, and also GGE laws and state orientation, regulations or bannings, who participates in these processes, other stakeholders, non-human bias issues. There are so many issues that we can discuss. However, before going on to response to the answers, we will have the second discussant, Dr. Park Kyung-gu, and he is from the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice. The floor is yours.
네.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your introduction. I am Park Kyung-kyu from KICJ. It is a great honor to join as a discussant in such a conference. I would like to thank the presenters for giving us a very insightful presentations on LAWS and the legal policy related and ethical issues. Human history shows that war is an inevitable part of it, and the conduct of war and its development is closely related to science and technology advancement. Along with the development of AI, AWS or LAWS, that is based on AI technology, is being developed, and there are reports that it was used in the war in Ukraine. On the definition of what a lethal autonomous weapon system is, there seems to be no consensus in the international community yet. But overall, the so-called killer robots can be an example. These are used in warfare, but without meaningful control of human being. These systems follow the programmed order and autonomously select and aim targets. This is what people understand as autonomous weapons system. Whether we will allow the use of such AWS in warfare, and if so, under what conditions, and to what extent will it be allowed? These are questions that are a grave challenge for not only the respect of IHL, but in the international criminal justice field. The provision under the Rome Statute of ICC, IHL should be reflected to promote humanization of war. So, just as the Geneva Convention, the Rome Statute seeks that toxins or toxic weapons or expanding bullets, in that case, even if it is used to harm enemy combatants, the use of that in warfare should be completely banned, and if it is breached, it is considered as a war crime. Using AWS in warfare, opponents say that due to misjudgment of AWS, it could attack civilians or civilian facilities. And even if it only targets combatants, surrendering combatant cannot be a target, but it is difficult for an AWS to autonomously make this distinction. So these are some ethical questions that are pointed out. On the other hand, AWS is closely tied to the defense capability and defense industry of countries. Those proponents of use of AWS in warfare comment that under very strict conditions, for example, under certain regions or locations or under certain circumstances, it may be used to target only enemy combatants, and if there is no chance that it will mistakenly target civilians, then AWS must be allowed to be used in warfare. In the movie Terminator, the AI supercomputer Skynet, when humans tried to stop it, it deemed humanity as its enemy and launched nuclear war. AI-based AWS's application in warfare might be allowed under very strict conditions, but each state will continue to strive to develop related AI technology. Along with such advancement, there is a higher chance that AWS might malfunction and go against the will of the human operator and target not only enemy combatants, but show hostility towards humanity. Such risk is embedded in AI-based AWS. It is a potential risk that is embedded in such systems. IHL, or International Criminal Law, states that toxic weapons or expanding bullets or other certain types of weapons are banned in warfare, even if it is used only to harm combatants of enemy. If we think about the intention, we must think about whether AWS should be used in warfare under strict conditions in light of the embedded potential risk in such lethal autonomous weapon systems. Such risks should be further highlighted, and with regards to that, I would like to listen to opinions of Professor Yu-Jun Gu and our other panelists or presenters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions and comments. He raised some questions in regard to potential risk of autonomous weapons and the permissibility or admissibility of autonomous weapons like killer robots. Now, who would like to go first to answer these questions? If there is no volunteer, then perhaps we may be able to. Oh yeah, sure. Bhutan, Dr. Bhutan, please.
I'm happy to say a few remarks. I've tried to follow much. On the translation, it was a bit not too easy to follow, but I will try to do a few remarks. First, I want to thank our discussant putting forward the victim perspective, because I'm sure Maya would also agree that we should also indeed put a bit more attention to the victims and the people against whom who will be affected populations, right? I think, as you mentioned, why are those AI systems deployed, and the argument is often that, oh well, the promise of AI is that it will surpass human capacities at certain specific tasks, and so it could be more precise and accurate, and so the promise is that it could reduce harm both for combatants and for civilians. And so, yeah, if those advantages are true, why not? But as you also pointed out, the reality of AI is that the current systems are not that reliable in terms of precision, of accuracy. As was mentioned before, they can be very much ingraining biases through the training data. And they can be subject to adversarial attack, right? So AI systems that perform image recognition that could be used to distinguish civilians from combatants or military from civilian objects. We've shown there's many studies that show that it's very easy with the current state of AI to trick the system, because again, AI does not understand things. It just does analysis of data in pixels. And in that case, you just change a little pixel in the image, and what was a civilian suddenly is seen as a combatant. So machine learning will bring a lot of unpredictability and unforeseeability. And in that sense, I think the argument of dignity, both of the combatants and on the civilians, is one that we should not forget. Dignity is a principle in human rights law, is as the foundation of some humanitarian principles, and of course is a big debate in the ethical domain. Maybe Sajjad has a few things to say on that. A few more things I want to say. Yeah, on the ban versus regulation, I think that when we talk about unacceptable use that should be banned, we can actually apply existing principles and norms. Indiscriminate weapons are unlawful anyway. So weapons that would be indiscriminate by nature, we don't need an additional ban. That's already not existing. But the regulation, I think there are some efforts to be done, not necessarily or not only at the level of states, which are already the subject of Geneva Convention, but there's two aspects I want to highlight regarding regulation, is to insist on regulation at the stage of development. So that's where I think we should put more effort, not just regulate for accountability in case something wrong happened, but really insist on regulating prior to anything. And because the decisions made by engineers, made by policymakers, made by private and public actors, when they decide to engage in developing certain AI systems, those are the more important decisions. When someone decides which training data will be applied, what will be the goals that are given to the AI. AI machine learning systems function with some sort of goals, and they are fed data and they should achieve a goal. Which goals are chosen? So regulation here, I think, is very important. And through, again, the existing international law framework, first of all, states have existing obligations to ensure that they develop AI in compliance with international, that is through IHL, but also through human rights law, which also includes a duty to protect and to ensure protection. And one point that I want to highlight, because it also relates to this, as was mentioned by previous presenters, the commercial aspect, the fact that a lot of AI is developed in a commercial setting by private companies. And that we should not see that as unregulated either, because again, under international human rights law, states have a duty to ensure that private actors within their jurisdiction comply with human rights law. They're not unregulated. So I really want to insist on the fact that it's important to regulate prior to deployment, and to also address private companies. One last short point on issues of criminal responsibility. It's not the part that I'm the most expert on, but I'm familiar with work on some of my colleagues, and here we have an issue of whether soldiers using autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon system, if it results in a war crime, the problem is, can we demonstrate that there was mens rea? Mens rea meaning intent, criminal intent to commit a war crime. If we cannot demonstrate criminal intent to commit a war crime, we cannot prosecute a war crime. And the problem is with semi-autonomous systems, it becomes very difficult when the operator doesn't have a lot of control on the output. It makes it very difficult to establish that high level of criminal intent. So those are my few remarks, and I hope they're helpful.
Thank you very much. Before going on, Professor Yu Jung-gu might need to leave early, so if you excuse us, he might be able to answer this.
Okay, sorry for leaving earlier at the having another Zoom meeting, but I think the reason why we have to regulate the autonomous weapon system, it's not the question of the effect of the weapon, it's the nature of the weapon. Which means the maybe WMD weapon system and any other kinetic weapon system to cause more superfluous injury and then unnecessary harm, which means the totally banning the weapon system in the whole life cycle of the weapon system. But I think the autonomous weapon system, definitely if it causes a death of life, which means they combine another kinetic weapon system using AI technology. So the question is, it is okay, even the AI technology maybe can do better judgment than human being, how we can maybe leave our life to the hands of the AI technology. That can be one issue. Second issue for regulating the AI, even in the commercial sector, in data processing in the AI system, it's very hard to put the responsibility of the AI, because it's like a black box. In previous speaker mentioned that if the AI application for military use, in that case, it's hard to put responsibility and then the giving any some accountability of misuse of AI technology. That can be second issue why we need to regulate the AI systems. And then lastly, the speaker, the commentator give some very insightful question and comment. I think in the law GGE, they emphasize on the human-centered approach, and also they try to maybe set up the whole architecture, including human rights and then other state responsibility and then other international law. But in reality, there is big maybe controversial approach between these states. I think only focus on the IHL issue. So that gonna be some current issue. But we have to also maybe understand the distinction between the cyber and outer space and AI cases. It's slightly different some approach, which means relatively AI cases combined with the whole weapon system. Basically, weapon system may be developed by the state member. Even they can used by the non-state actor. So that's the maybe CCW can be managed and operated by the state member state approach. And also the Berenice mentioned that even the commercial misuse of AI, state has some obligation for duty to care, not only some non-state actor, but also another third-party state recording the due diligence issue. Maybe as you clearly, I totally agree with your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. Maya Braham, would you like to respond to some questions?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to my co-panelists and the discussants for their interesting and thought-provoking contributions to this debate. I think from our perspective, it's perhaps useful to bring out, especially if we speak about the international policy debate on AI and on autonomous weapon systems, that the two are not necessarily the same thing. So from the perspective of the International Committee of the Red Cross, autonomous weapon systems can rely on artificial intelligence, but they must not do so. Meaning there are autonomous weapon systems in our understanding of this notion that do not incorporate AI. Now, in the context of autonomous weapon systems then specifically, right? The International Committee of the Red Cross and many other stakeholders in the multilateral policy debate that is ongoing on this issue propose and recommend to states to adopt legally binding regulation that consisting of two main sort of kinds of regulation. The first, prohibitions, and combined with restrictions and some say also positive obligations or requirements. So prohibitions first on what we would call colloquially unpredictable autonomous weapon systems, those that cannot be sufficiently predicted, understood, and explained, but also a prohibition on anti-personnel autonomous weapon systems, those that are designed or used to target persons directly. And then combined with a number of limits on those that are not prohibited, of course, autonomous weapon systems, to increase the chance of their lawful and ethically acceptable use or ethically justifiable use. So we propose limits on the place, the sort of the spatial area within which autonomous weapon systems can autonomously select and target, the duration over which they do that, the context of use or situations of use. And here in particular, we see humanitarian benefit in limiting use to situations where civilians are not present, and then also restrictions on the types of targets that are encoded and that are pursued with these sorts of weapon systems. And here we see less risk of unlawful attacks resulting from the use if autonomous weapons are used only against targets that are under IHL military objectives by nature, because their targetability, lawful targetability, is more stable over time. It changes less with changing circumstances. And combined then with requirements in terms of human-machine interaction to facilitate human supervision and also intervention if need be. Now, as other speakers have already said, it's not easy to come to multilateral agreement on such things, on new technologies in general, new military applications in particular. And the deliberations in the CCW have progressed to a certain level of depth and substantive detail, but there are important challenges that in this forum. Now, from our perspective, states we have no preference for any particular forum or process. We support states and other stakeholders in any efforts that are hold the prospect of effective military effective regulations to be adopted in a timely manner, and that can be also in other forum. And as one speaker just mentioned, one of the perhaps shortfalls of discussions in the CCW is that it's very difficult to articulate human rights dimensions, other international legal dimensions. There is challenging to effectively bring in ethical considerations, and as others also outlined, certain actors are empowered in any given sort of multilateral and other forum, and affected communities are certainly not among them to make their voice heard in this debate, to bring it into the policy space at the multilateral level is a challenge, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to facilitate the taking into consideration these perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarjad Sultanza, would you like to give us some comments or answers?
Thank you again, and thanks to everyone. I would like to, just make a quick comment in response to the second discussant, Kyung-Yu, who talked about the principle of distinction, and the challenges of discriminating between who is combatant, who is not combatant. And of course, this is something that a lot of people have discussed, and this is a very, very important issue indeed, which can lead to limiting the use and development and operation of autonomous systems and use of military AI. I think one important issue is, especially the context of use is also very important, and this is something which is also discussed by a few others. For example, the airborne use of military technologies, it would be much harder the principle to hold the principle of distinction as opposed to, for example, the naval use, because because when you have a submarine, for example, it might be a bit easier to distinguish between what's a military target and what's not a military target, or in the air, as opposed to when you're out there and you see some people who just look a bit differently. This, of course, also applies, although we are talking about military AI, of course, any other security uses of AI, even in policing, may have similar concerns as well. And as for some of the comments that Mitzi mentioned, I think I do indeed think that whether we are talking about banning killer robots or regulating it, I think one of the comments that you wanted to make is that indeed it's important to think about military AI as a bigger topic than the context of killer robots. Whether they're banned or not banned, that should not put us at ease and think that, okay, we have solved the problems, because there's a lot of issues, a lot of legal and moral issues which come from non-fully autonomous systems, which are still very important. And even though the killer robots, if they're banned, it doesn't mean that we have addressed those issues. So it's very important for us to broaden our perspective. And that's why we talk about human agency a lot, because human agency is not something that's black and white, and then suddenly we 100% lose it if it's a killer robot and a fully autonomous system, and suddenly we fully have it. We think that it's very important to talk about degrees of agency and then see how meaningful that agency is and whether we have an effective degree of agency. This is also why we talk about different channels of exercising agency, different ways in which humans can exercise their agency. There's, of course, some of the things that can be done at the context of use, at the context of operation of the systems. But then, as mentioned by others, especially Berenice, we also want to highlight the channels of design and also the channel of regulation, because it's very important for us to think about what systems we are designing in the first place, what are the parameters, what are the limitations, what are the capabilities that they bring, and what can be done with them and what cannot. But at the same time, regulation is also important, both in terms of lawmaking and also in terms of mechanisms for attribution of responsibility, because one way to exercise agency is also make sure that if things don't go well, then people are held accountable. And that is one way to also, for humans to exercise high degree of agency. With that comment, I just want to stop here and just hope that others, if they have got any comments, there's time for them.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. I'd like to open to the audience, and if you have any questions or comments, you can participate in this opportunity, in this instance. If there's no one at the moment, perhaps you can, perhaps we can wait later. We can wait and see. And discussions, we have two discussions, and if you have further, oh, Michi, you raise your hand, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the answers and also comments. It's very interesting that, you know, we are discussing as well the ethical or justifiable use of violence. In IHL, it's always that. You know, there's an ethical, there's a right way to go to war or to kill. There's, for example, the degrees of agency that Sajad had just mentioned. Does that mean also, like, the degrees of agency? Does that pertain to the degrees of agency that AI can act if, for example, it's weaponized? Does that mean AI will be able to will be allowed to choose between, if we say that the degree of agency that the AI would be limited to, if it's regulation, it cannot kill. But can they be designed to torture? Can they be designed to maim? We're talking about degrees of, injury, lethality. In violence, especially in armed conflict situations, is very complex. And even the laws that we already have, the existing mechanisms that we already have, some would argue it's enough. But if it's in principle, a lot of people would argue that it's enough. But I would argue, for example, that it's not. For example, just an example, in the mine ban treaty, which was first, of course, discussed in the CCW discussion, that it was brought out. Note that there are so many kinds of landmines. There's anti-personnel, there's anti-tank, and there's other things. But in the mine ban treaty, and in a treaty binding everyone that signed itself as a state party, the only weapon banned is the only type of landmine banned is the anti-personnel landmine. So when we're talking about degrees of agency, because there's an echo, I'm not sure if it's coming from me. Okay, it's gone. They would say that the landmine is the first autonomous weapon. When you just leave it there, it just functions. It will perform its functions without actually someone controlling it. It's especially the the victim activated landmine. So where are we in that discussion? Where in terms of crafting laws, in asking those ethical questions, are we just then saying the intent? Because if you put in regulation, as I said, the intent to use is already there. Because this is a Korean Institute of Criminology, in crime, when they establish the intent to kill, that will spell the difference between filing a case of homicide or murder. So these are, I think that just throwing that back into the discussion of, especially when we're talking about regulation. So if it's regulation, there's intent to develop, there's intent to produce, there's intent to use. If I don't think people would want to regulate something that they don't see any use for. So it's interesting that even in the past, even just after the war, for example, scientists in Japan were already, the Scientists Association, for example, in Japan, they already came out with a statement that they would not be helping in any development, scientific development that will be used for the purpose of war. Association of Scientists. So that was very clear. So in this case, is the position, when we're discussing this, is the position of maybe the panelists to allow that intent to exist in this. There are many conflicts right now. I mean, we are seeing it actually live on so many channels, even social media. So many armed conflicts around the world. So these are questions, especially for people who are working in conflict communities and also post-conflict communities who are seeing the actual impact of how these weapons are being used. So I would like to just put it back out there if we have time for another round.
Thank you. Sarja Sultanza, I think you brought up the questions of degree of agency. So would you like to answer the questions, or someone else would like to answer?
I think this is I did bring the idea of degree of agency. But I think I would prefer my lawyer panelists to discuss this issue because this is also partly legal. I can speak as a philosopher, of course, and mention whether there is already intent to use and not to use when we want to regulate it or not. Those are some of the concerns that Mitzi has mentioned a couple of times. But regulation is slightly out of the scope of my expertise, except that I can say that regulation, whether it is in terms of banning or limiting the use, is indeed an important step to take, because that is indeed one way to exercise our agency is through regulation in any form.
All right, thank you. Yes, Bernice Putin.
If I may just add a few words, because of course this is a big question that we're not going to answer in the remaining 2 minutes, but that's indeed one of our challenges, is that perhaps there's always the argument of what about if my enemy is adopting killer robots? Should we still refrain? To which extent do we put limits that would manage to be universal, right? To which extent will we be able to agree either in terms of ban or regulation? Just to which extent we can put constraints on military AI that would be globally accepted, or is it going to be a problem of different levels with some states? Like I'm based in the Netherlands. I know the Netherlands is quite committed to international law and limiting any use of AI that would not be aligned with its legal obligations and with its principles and values, but we know that it's not the case with every state. So these are some of the big questions on how to govern AI, and in particular military AI, that unfortunately I don't have the answer to, but I'm glad that it's raised, that it's an important major issue here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Since we have time restriction, and we can have one more final comments in 30 seconds if you like to have. Anyone who would like to make final statements, perhaps? Maya Braham, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think I'll just pick up on this idea of agency to perhaps say that, well, in IHL, there is this notion of the reasonable military commander, and this idea that the commander must be reasonably certain about certain things, must be in a position to reasonably assess prospectively what will happen. And so the burden really is to create the opportunities to create the conditions within which a commander may reasonably come to certain conclusions, right? And to prescribe these conditions, or to formulate limits and requirements so that this can be possible. And the other aspect to this is that agency offers choice, right? These technologies are not inevitable. These are choices that we as humankind make. Some of us are more empowered in the present structures than others, but from our perspective, it's important to make these choices in a manner that safeguards also humanity, even in war, not to be guided only by what is technically possible or militarily opportune, but also by where we would like the limits of what is lawful and what is acceptable in war to be drawn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of you. And we had great time discussing and presenting ideas. I think we had more inspirational and insightful moments than before. I hope this discussion will be continued further in the future. And I will end this session today, and I will give my floor back to the staff of the Korea Institute of Criminology and Justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great presentations and discussion. So now it's time to close the first day of the 9th KICJ International Forum. But we resume the forum tomorrow morning at 9 Korean Standard Time. So, and we are going to discuss the issue of human rights and automated decision making. So, I would like to once again thank today's speakers and discussants and all participants. So, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.